Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. Hopefully you guys have had a fun weekend of either seeing or maybe not seeing Fantastic Four. So I'm going to talk about some Easter eggs from that, but I really wanted to talk about Deadpool and X-Force. Yes, there is an X-Force movie that's in development. It's just kind of gotten pushed off to the side because of all the X-Men Apocalypse stuff going on right now. Before last year's Comic-Con in 2014, way before Deadpool footage leaked, before all that stuff happened, Fox announced the next several release dates for X-Men based movies. Part of that slate was X-Force being developed with the guy that did Kick-Ass 2, Jeff Wadlow. They hadn't really picked a director, they announced that they had hired Jeff Wadlow to start the script. Chase that timeline to December, and Rob Liefeld, X-Force creator, Deadpool creator, says that he's read a draft of the script. So, there is actually a draft of an X-Force movie out there. But within a couple days of that, Bryan Singer announced that they were making X-Men Apocalypse. So I think based on the success of Days of Future Past, Fox just shifted its priorities to put all of its eggs in that X-Men basket. In the simplest of terms, X-Force is a spin-off of X-Men, but because of some of the things they're doing with X-Men characters, it gets a little confusing because Cable is such a big part of it. I know everyone wants to see Cable in a Deadpool movie. I feel like he would probably show up in X-Force first. For those that don't know, Cable is the son of Scott Summers and a clone of Jean Grey named Madeline Pryor. In the movie universe, that already sounds pretty confusing just to explain. How did Jean Grey get cloned? When did they have a child? Well, just look at what they're doing with Jean Grey right now. Sophie Turner is the new Jean Grey. Clearly not quite old enough to be having children. Scott Summers right now, they're in the 80s in X-Men Apocalypse. So it looks like the beginnings of their relationship. So children are way off in the distance. That is probably why X-Force got shelved. Because Fox wants to use the Cable character, but it has to wait till he can logically rise from that universe, and they just did a big time travel movie. Cable himself is a big time travel character. He's like a time traveling man of action. It's kind of like if the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket became a mutant. If you remember what the future timeline looked like in Days of Future Past, very post-apocalyptic, and then you have Age of Apocalypse in the comics, which is also, very similar post-apocalyptic timeline. Cable was born out of things like that, so that's why he's so hardcore. So until crazy shit goes down with Apocalypse, you can't get to Cable. So right now he's riding the bench, but I do think, within 2 or 3 years, they could totally do an X-Force movie. For the most part, it seems like Sophie Turner, these younger characters, they're trying to make them the new main cast. So when we see a sequel to X-Men Apocalypse, it'll be with these young characters again. So it just makes things a little more complicated with Cable, because it's if clearly they want to use all these really young characters, then how is it that you're going to explain this crazy child from the future hell-bent on taking down evil mutants when things have not gone crazy and you've just done a big time travel movie? So I think that they're just trying to put some distance between this and Days of Future Past. The other alternative would be to do an X-Force movie in another 2 years and then just bring Cable on, let him be Cable, and not completely explain who he is or who his parents are till the sequel movie. That'd be like a Game of Thrones situation where a lot of the audience has already read the stories, they know where he comes from, but the majority of the movie-going public has no idea who Cable's parents are. So he's just this mystery, crazy, hardcore character. If Game of Thrones can survive a situation like that, where a lot of the fandom has already read the story that they're doing, and it can still be super popular, I think that X-Men and X-Force can do it too. Because there is no way that they're going to do an X-Force movie without doing Cable. You guys can let me know, how do you think that they should explain Cable, his existence, when Jean Grey and Scott Summers are teenagers right now and they just did a time travel movie? I feel like if they went the hardcore comic book route, they would cast Liam Neeson as Cable, and he would show up doing a version of his Taken character. I have a very particular set of skills. Couldn't you just see him showing up and kicking Sophie Turner and all these young mutants in their asses? The other big thing about Cable is Strife. He's like an evil clone of Cable. I think they would sidestep him for quite a while. Maybe if they got to a third X-Force film, they could bring him out. But I feel like Cable, just at his core, works really good as this hardcore mutant drill sergeant fighting amongst the more hardcore factions of mutants. And as for rounding the cast out, the original lineup was Boom Boom, Cable, Cannonball, Domino, Feral, Shatterstar, and Warpath. There's also Sunspot and Siren, and we actually saw a couple of those characters in Days of Future Past, in the future timeline. So Bryan Singer actually kind of laid some of the track work for the original X-Force team. But logically, what they try to do, just because there are so many X-Men universe characters that Fox hasn't been able to get to yet, So they probably use it as an opportunity to develop new characters that they haven't done on screen at all before, and then also let some of the other minor characters cross over. Some of the characters that we saw from the Future Timeline and Days of Future Past, some of the new X-Men Apocalypse characters. I feel like Olivia Munn couldn't open an X-Men film by herself, but she would do really well in a much bigger role in X-Force. She's playing Psylocke, for those that didn't know. She didn't join X-Force till 2010, but I feel like depending on how strong the actors are that they get for X-Men Apocalypse, they can just help boost any X-Force spinoff that they do. But you guys can let me know, would you be okay with them being characters that weren't on the original X-Force team? Like, Evan Peters is amazing, but Quicksilver was never like a huge character in the X-Force comics. Either way, the reality is that we probably won't see an X-Force movie till we get closer to the second Deadpool movie. Like, if Deadpool is as successful as everyone thinks it's going to be, they'll roll out a sequel within 2 years. I think, around that same time is when we would see the X-Force film. If you want to read some really cool X-Force stories that are actually pretty friendly in terms of film adaptation, you can start with A Force to be Reckoned With. That's New Mutants 98 to 100 and X-Force number 1 to 4. It's a pretty simple sell. It's the origin of the original comic book X-Force team. There's the Apocalypse Solution and the Dark Angel saga. That's Uncanny X-Force number 1 to 18. This is after Wolverine and Psylocke were on the team, so they might have to swap a couple characters. Psylocke would totally work. Wolverine not going to be around that much longer, unless they recast the character. And then more recently, there's the Wanted storyline. That's Cable and X-Force number 1 to 5. The story's kind of like Ocean's 11 meets Fast and Furious. A Fast and Furious Marvel movie actually does sound pretty badass. So despite terrible movies, there's still lots of awesome stuff going on in Fox's universe of characters. You have all the Deadpool stuff, you have X-Force on the horizon. We know X-Men Apocalypse is dropping next year, so get really pumped about that. And there's an X-Men TV show that they're trying to negotiate the rights for with Marvel. So in case you guys haven't seen it, you can click here for my Fantastic Four Hail Hydra review, and you can click here to watch the Deadpool trailer again 10 or 15 more times. Hopefully that'll be a good antidote for a bad Fantastic Four movie. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tomorrow.